Stanford Business School graduation should have been the proudest moment of my life. Instead, I sat there watching other families celebrate while my phone buzzed with a message that shattered my heart. Dad's text read, "Don't expect help. You're on your own now. Should have picked an easier major if you wanted family support." My throat tightened as laughter echoed around me. Then my phone rang. Marcus, my CFO, was calling about our company's IPO hitting $1 billion. The call connected to a nearby Bluetooth speaker. Everyone heard everything. My father's face went completely white. The graduation crowd was staring at me, whispers spreading like wildfire across the ceremony. My father Richard looked like he'd seen a ghost, his mouth hanging open as the words billion-dollar IPO echoed in his ears. But nobody knew the real story behind Cloud Fortress, the company that had just made me incredibly wealthy at 26 years old. It started during my sophomore year in 2021. Professor Williams was teaching our computer science course about cybersecurity vulnerabilities when I noticed something troubling. Small businesses had virtually no affordable protection against cloud-based attacks. That night, while my roommate Jessica slept peacefully, I stayed up coding security algorithms that could protect sensitive data without breaking small company budgets. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m, when I finally cracked the encryption sequence that would make my software both powerful and affordable. My fingers were cramping from typing, but I knew I had something special. The next morning, I pitched my idea to my study partner Brian, a brilliant engineering major who understood the technical complexities immediately. We started working out of the campus coffee shop, spending every free moment developing our prototype. Brian handled the back-end infrastructure while I focused on user interface design and client acquisition. Our first real test came when Dr. Patterson's medical practice needed HIPAA-compliant cloud storage for patient records. We charged them $2,000 for our basic package, which seemed like a fortune at the time. The money felt surreal in my hands. I'd never earned anything close to that amount, especially not from something I'd created myself. Brian and I celebrated with pizza that night, but I was already thinking about our next client. Word spread quickly through the local business community about our affordable cybersecurity solution. Within 3 months, we had landed our biggest client yet, TechFlow, a mid-sized technology company that needed enterprise-level security for their customer database. The contract was worth $50,000, more money than I'd ever imagined earning as a college student. But landing that deal required persistence I didn't know I possessed. I called TechFlow's IT director 17 times before he agreed to meet with us. Brian and I prepared for 3 weeks, anticipating every possible question about our software's capabilities. The presentation lasted 2 hours, with their entire IT team grilling us about security protocols, data encryption standards, and system integration processes. When they finally said yes, I cried in the parking lot, not from relief, but from the overwhelming realization that we'd built something valuable enough for a real company to trust with their most sensitive information. Brian was jumping up and down like we'd won the lottery, which in many ways we had. That success led to more clients, and soon we needed professional help managing our finances. I found Marcus through LinkedIn, a certified public accountant who had experience with technology startups. Convincing him to leave his stable corporate job to join 2 college students took months of persistent emails and phone calls. Marcus brought credibility and business expertise we desperately needed. He incorporated our company properly, set up accounting systems, and helped us understand tax implications of our rapid growth. More importantly, he believed in our vision of democratizing cybersecurity for small businesses across America. By junior year, Cloud Fortress was generating $500,000 in annual revenue. We had 12 employees, most of them part-time college students who worked remotely while finishing their degrees. Our client base included medical practices, legal firms, accounting companies, and small manufacturers who couldn't afford expensive enterprise security solutions. The irony wasn't lost on me that while my father Richard constantly criticized my computer games, I was building a real business that solved actual problems for hardworking Americans. He had no idea that his daughter was earning more money than he made at his management position with the city transportation department. I deliberately kept Cloud Fortress secret from my family after Richard's dismissive comments during freshman year. When I mentioned studying cybersecurity, he laughed and said I should focus on finding a husband instead of wasting time on computer nonsense. His attitude convinced me that proving him wrong would be more satisfying than seeking his approval. The secrecy became easier as the business grew more complex. Business meetings, client calls, and software development consumed most of my free time. When family members asked about my busy schedule, I simply said I was studying hard and working part-time at the campus library. They never questioned the explanation because it fit their expectations of a struggling college student. Revenue growth accelerated during senior year, as word-of-mouth referrals brought larger clients seeking our services. We expanded beyond basic cloud storage security to offer comprehensive cybersecurity audits, employee training programs, and incident response services. Our team grew to 40 full-time employees operating from a real office space in downtown Palo Alto. The business success filled a void that family approval never could. Every satisfied client, every successful security implementation, every prevented cyber attack validated my choices in ways my father's praise never would have. I was building something meaningful that protected other people's livelihoods and sensitive information. Now, sitting at graduation with everyone staring at me after Marcus' call, I realized the secret was finally out. My father's text message about being on my own had arrived at the exact moment when my independence became undeniably clear to everyone present. The timing felt like cosmic justice. The graduation ceremony continued around us, but our family section had become the center of attention. Other families were whispering and pointing, trying to understand how a young woman they'd probably never heard of had just become a billionaire overnight. My father's face cycled through emotions he'd never seen before: shock, confusion, calculation, and something that might have been fear. Marcus' call had exposed more than just my business success. It had revealed years of financial manipulation that shaped every decision I'd made since high school. The story of why I'd hidden Cloud Fortress from my family went deeper than simple independence. It was rooted in betrayal that started long before I ever wrote my first line of code. During senior year of high school, I'd been accepted to Stanford with a partial academic scholarship covering 60% of tuition. The remaining $30,000 annually seemed manageable when my father Richard promised to cover those costs from my college fund. Had been saving money for my education since childhood, or so I believed. The acceptance letter arrived in March of 2018, and I remember dancing around our kitchen while Mom cried happy tears. Richard seemed proud that day, telling neighbors about his daughter getting into one of America's top universities. For 3 months, I planned my future around the security of knowing my education was financially covered. Then, everything changed in June. Richard sat me down for what he called a serious financial conversation about college costs. He claimed the family was facing unexpected expenses and suggested I consider community college for the first 2 years. The college fund, he explained apologetically, wasn't as robust as Head originally thought. Something felt wrong about his explanation, but I was 17 and trusted my father completely. Mom looked uncomfortable during that conversation, avoiding eye contact and fidgeting with her wedding ring. When I pressed for details about these sudden financial problems, Richard became defensive and accused me of being ungrateful for what the family could provide. The truth came out 3 days later, when Mom pulled me aside for a private conversation. She'd been struggling with guilt about Richard's deception and couldn't watch me sacrifice my dreams for his lies. The college fund existed, all right, but Richard had spent it on vintage automobiles over the past 2 years. His garage housed a 1967 Mustang, a 1970 Camaro, and a 1973 Corvette, each worth $15,000 to $20,000. While claiming he was saving for my education, had been indulging his midlife crisis with classic cars. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd known was possible. Mom begged me not to confront Richard directly, fearing it would destroy their marriage. Instead, she suggested we explore student loan options and financial aid opportunities. I spent the rest of that summer working 3 jobs: waitressing at a local diner, tutoring younger students in mathematics, and cleaning houses for wealthy families in our neighborhood. The financial stress was overwhelming for an 18-year-old. I was working 60 hours per week while completing college preparation courses and maintaining the grade point average required for my scholarship. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, and my social life disappeared entirely as friends went to parties and summer events I couldn't attend. Richard's manipulation didn't end with the college fund theft. Throughout my freshman year, he would offer financial help during stressful moments, then withdraw the assistance just when I needed it most. Before midterm exams, he promised to send $500 for textbooks, then claimed he'd forgotten when the money never arrived. The pattern became clearer during sophomore year. Whenever I faced a financial emergency, Richard would initially offer help, making me feel grateful and dependent. Then he'd create reasons why the help wasn't possible, leaving me scrambling to solve problems I'd expected his assistance would address. The emotional manipulation was almost worse than the money itself. Christmas of 2019 was the breaking point. While claiming he couldn't afford to help with my spring semester textbooks, Richard surprised the family with a $25,000 Harley-Davidson motorcycle. He spent Christmas morning showing off his new toy, while I quietly calculated how many months of college expenses that motorcycle represented. The favoritism toward my younger brother Tyler became impossible to ignore. Richard fully funded Tyler's enrollment in a prestigious private art school, covering tuition, housing, supplies, and spending money without question. When I asked about the different treatment, Richard claimed Tyler was pursuing practical skills while my business degree was theoretical nonsense. Extended family members began treating me differently after Richard's careful character assassination campaign. At family gatherings, aunts and uncles would ask pointed questions about my grades and finances, clearly believing I was struggling academically or making poor decisions. Richard had painted me as irresponsible and ungrateful, setting the stage for years of family isolation. The medical emergency during sophomore year tested every relationship in our family. I developed severe pneumonia and needed prescription medication that cost $400 after insurance. My part-time job at the campus bookstore barely covered food and basic expenses, leaving me unable to afford necessary medical care. I called Richard desperately, explaining that I couldn't breathe properly and needed the antibiotics to recover. He promised to transfer money that afternoon, then called back 2 hours later, claiming his bank account was temporarily frozen due to a suspected fraudulent charge. The excuse sounded plausible until I learned he'd purchased concert tickets for himself and Mom that same day. My best friend Sarah's family ultimately paid for the medication after Sarah found me collapsed in our dormitory hallway. Mrs. Chen, Sarah's mother, drove 4 hours to bring me homemade soup and stayed overnight to monitor my recovery. The kindness from Sarah's family contrasted sharply with my own father's calculated neglect. That experience crystallized my understanding of Richard's manipulation strategy. He maintained control through financial dependency, offering help to create gratitude, then withholding assistance to demonstrate power. The cycle kept me emotionally attached while ensuring I remained financially vulnerable and seeking his approval. Starting Cloud Fortress became more than a business opportunity. It represented complete liberation from Richard's financial manipulation and emotional control. Every dollar the company earned was money he couldn't take away, couldn't promise and withdraw, couldn't use to make me feel small and dependent. Financial independence became my primary motivation for business success. The secrecy surrounding Cloud Fortress protected both my emotional well-being and my business interests. If Richard had known about the company's early success, he would have found ways to claim credit, demand involvement, or create chaos that could have damaged client relationships. Keeping him ignorant preserved my peace of mind and professional reputation. Now, with Marcus Call broadcasting my billionaire status to everyone at graduation, Richard was learning the truth in the most public way possible. The text message telling me I was on my own, had arrived at the exact moment when my financial independence became undeniable. The irony felt like poetic justice for years of systematic betrayal. What Richard didn't realize as he sat there processing Marcus' billion-dollar announcement was that his financial manipulation was only part of a broader campaign to isolate me from potential support systems. Over the past year, had systematically destroyed my relationships with extended family members, ensuring that when his financial control finally ended, he'd have nowhere else to turn. The sabotage began subtly during Christmas of 2023. Extended family gathered at grandmother Dorothy's house, as tradition dictated, and I noticed immediate changes in how aunts and uncles interacted with me. Conversations felt strained, and several relatives seemed to be studying my behavior for signs of problems I didn't understand. Uncle Stephen, who'd always been warm and encouraging, barely spoke to me during dinner. When I asked about his new job with the State Highway Department, he gave short, careful answers and changed the subject quickly. Aunt Margaret, normally full of questions about school and future plans, seemed uncomfortable making eye contact and kept glancing at Richard nervously. The most painful change was grandmother Dorothy's distance. She'd always been my strongest family advocate, bragging about my grades and defending my college choices when other relatives questioned the expense. That Christmas, she treated me with polite reserve, as if I were a stranger rather than her first granddaughter. I couldn't understand what had changed until my cousin Emma accidentally revealed the truth during a private conversation in January. We were catching up over coffee when she mentioned feeling sorry about my financial troubles and offered to help if I needed anything. When I expressed confusion, Emma realized she'd made a mistake. Richard had spent months telling extended family that I was struggling financially and academically at Stanford. He claimed I was too proud to ask for help directly, so he was managing family communications to protect my dignity. According to his stories, he'd borrowed money from several relatives and failed to repay loans, creating awkward situations he was trying to resolve quietly. The lies were sophisticated and believable. Richard told Uncle Stephen that Id asked for $3,000 to cover unexpected medical expenses, then used the money for spring break vacation instead of health care. Aunt Margaret heard that Id requested help with textbooks, then sold them for cash to pay off credit card debt from irresponsible shopping. Each story contained enough specific details to seem credible, while painting me as financially irresponsible and emotionally manipulative. Richard positioned himself as the concerned father, trying to help his daughter while protecting other family members from my supposed attempts to take advantage of their generosity. Grandmother Dorothy received the most damaging information. Richard convinced her that I only contacted family members when I needed money, treating relationships as financial opportunities rather than meaningful connections. He shared screenshots of text messages that were carefully edited to remove context, making casual conversations appear to be desperate pleas for assistance. The character assassination extended to social media, where Richard shared carefully curated posts about my college experience. He would screenshot social media photos from my rare nights out with friends, then share them with family members as evidence of irresponsible behavior. A single photo from Sarah's birthday dinner became proof that I was spending money recklessly while claiming financial hardship. Richard's manipulation reached its peak during the attempted intervention at Easter dinner. Aunt Margaret, genuinely concerned about what she believed was my financial crisis, organized a family meeting to address my supposed problems. Extended relatives had pooled money to help with what they thought were overwhelming student loans and poor spending decisions. The intervention was humiliating and heartbreaking. Family members I loved and respected sat around grandmother Dorothy's dining room table, expressing concern about behaviors that existed only in Richard's fictional narratives. They offered advice for managing money, suggested counseling for what they believed were shopping addictions, and proposed payment plans for debts that didn't exist. I tried explaining that I wasn't experiencing financial difficulties, but Richard had prepared for my denials. Had told everyone that pride and shame prevented me from acknowledging the extent of my problems. My attempts to clarify the truth were interpreted as further evidence of the psychological issues Richard had described. The isolation strategy was brilliant and cruel. Richard systematically removed every potential source of emotional or financial support outside his direct control. Extended family members who might have offered help or alternative perspectives now viewed me with suspicious concern rather than unconditional love and trust. Social gatherings became uncomfortable trials where relatives watched my behavior for signs of the problems Richard had described. Innocent comments about school or work were analyzed for hidden meanings, and normal college experiences were interpreted through the lens of financial irresponsibility and emotional instability. The most insidious aspect of Richard's campaign was how it made me doubt my own perceptions and relationships. When family members treated me differently, I began wondering if I'd done something wrong or failed to meet expectations I didn't understand. The gaslighting was subtle but effective, creating self-doubt that complemented the external isolation. By graduation day, Richard had successfully positioned himself as my only reliable family connection, while simultaneously making that relationship conditional on his approval and financial generosity. The text message telling me I was on my own was meant to be the final demonstration of his power over my life and future prospects. What Richard couldn't have anticipated was that his isolation strategy had backfired spectacularly. Instead of making me dependent on his approval, the systematic betrayal had motivated me to build genuine independence through Cloud Fortress. The family support he'd destroyed was replaced by business relationships based on mutual respect and shared success. Marcus' call about the IPO was more than just financial news. It was public vindication that exposed years of calculated lies and manipulation. Every family member present was hearing evidence that contradicted everything Richard had told them about my character, capabilities, and life choices. The extended family members who'd attended graduation out of obligation or concern were now witnessing the truth. Their supposedly struggling, irresponsible niece had built a billion-dollar company while maintaining excellent grades and graduating with honors. Richard's carefully constructed narrative was crumbling in real time. The graduation ceremony had effectively stopped around us. Dr. Harrison, Stanford's Dean of Business, was still speaking at the podium, but our section of the audience was entirely focused on the drama unfolding in the Chen family seating area. Marcus' voice continued crackling through the Bluetooth speaker system, oblivious to the public nature of our conversation. "Alva, the morning trading numbers are incredible," Marcus continued enthusiastically. "Cloud Fortress opened at $47 per share and climbed to $68 within the first hour. We're seeing institutional investors fighting for position, and 3 major financial news networks want interviews this afternoon." The audience around us was processing this information with growing excitement and disbelief. Fellow business school graduates were turning in their chairs, pointing at me and whispering frantically to their families. Parents who'd never heard my name 5 minutes earlier were now Googling Cloud Fortress IPO on their phones, trying to understand what they were witnessing. My father, Richard, sat frozen in his chair, his complexion shifting from pale white to sickly green as the full implications became clear. The daughter head just told to expect no help was apparently worth more money than he could comprehend. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his phone, probably wanting to delete that devastating text message before anyone else could see it. Mom's reaction was completely different. Patricia had tears streaming down her cheeks, but these were tears of pride and vindication rather than sadness. She'd known about Richard's manipulation for years, and watching his lies crumble publicly was providing emotional relief she hadn't expected. Her smile grew wider each time Marcus mentioned another milestone number. "The analyst projections are conservative at $2.3 billion, Marcus continued, his excitement building with each sentence. "Goldman Sachs is calling Cloud Fortress the most successful cybersecurity IPO in 5 years. Alva, you've built something that's changing how Americans think about data protection." Tyler, my younger brother, looked completely lost. His trust fund from Richard's favoritism suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the wealth it earned independently. The art school education Richard had funded so generously was valuable, but it couldn't compare to building a company that protected thousands of American businesses from cyber threats. Extended family members were having their own revelations. Uncle Stephen was staring at his phone, reading articles about Cloud Fortress that mentioned my role as founder and chief executive officer. Aunt Margaret was frantically texting someone, probably her husband, trying to process the disconnect between Richard's stories and this public vindication. Cousin Emma looked mortified. She'd been the family member who accidentally revealed Richard's lies about my supposed financial troubles. Now she was witnessing proof that I'd been building enormous wealth while family members pitied me based on Richard's fabricated stories about borrowing money and making irresponsible decisions. The business reporters covering graduation for alumni publications were suddenly paying attention to our family section. Several had pulled out notebooks and were taking careful notes as Marcus continued describing Cloud Fortress market performance and growth projections. My private success was becoming public news whether I wanted attention or not. Investment firms are calling this a watershed moment for cybersecurity innovation. Marcus' voice continued through the speaker. The software platforms you developed are being recognized as revolutionary approaches to protecting small business data. Forbes wants to discuss featuring you on their cover next month. Professor Williams, my computer science instructor from sophomore year, was sitting 3 rows ahead with other faculty members. He turned around with a huge smile, clearly remembering the late-night conversations about cybersecurity gaps that had inspired Cloud Fortress founding. His expression conveyed pride in a student who'd turned academic discussions into world-changing business innovation. Fellow graduates were beginning to understand why I'd always been busy, why I'd declined social events and study groups, why I'd seemed distracted during networking events that other students considered crucial for career development. They'd thought I was antisocial or academically struggling. Reality was that I'd been building a company that now employed hundreds of people. The graduation venue's security team was starting to take notice of the crowd attention focusing on our section. Several staff members were quietly positioning themselves around our area, probably anticipating media requests or crowd management issues once the ceremony ended. My life was about to change dramatically, in ways I hadn't fully considered. "Alva, are you there?" Marcus asked, his voice cutting through my overwhelming thoughts. "The reporters want to know if you're available for a conference call at 4 this afternoon. CNN's financial team is particularly interested in discussing how Cloud Fortress democratizes cybersecurity for American small businesses." I finally found my voice. "Marcus, I'm at my graduation ceremony right now. Can we discuss media strategy after the ceremony ends?" My response caused another wave of whispers, as people realized I was actually responding to this surreal conversation. "Of course! Congratulations on graduating, by the way." Marcus laughed. "I got so excited about the IPO numbers that I forgot this was your big day. Enjoy the ceremony, and we'll coordinate interviews later. This is going to be an incredible week for Cloud Fortress, and for you personally." The call ended, leaving hundreds of people staring at me with expressions ranging from amazement to calculation. Fellow students looked impressed and slightly envious. Parents seemed to be wondering if their own children had hidden business empires they hadn't discovered. Faculty members appeared proud and curious about how I'd managed academic excellence while building a company, but the most intense stare came from my father. Richard's face had cycled through multiple emotions during the call: shock, disbelief, anger, fear, and now, what looked like desperate calculation. He was probably trying to figure out how to position himself favorably in this new reality where his daughter controlled enormous wealth and influence. The text message telling me not to expect help suddenly seemed not just cruel, but absurdly ironic. Richard had withdrawn financial support at the exact moment when my own financial success became impossible to ignore. The timing created a narrative that made his manipulation appear even more petty and small-minded than it already was. Dr. Harrison was concluding his remarks at the podium, unaware that his ceremony had been interrupted by one of the most dramatic family confrontations in Stanford's graduation history. The official celebration was ending, but our family's reckoning was just beginning. The graduation reception started immediately after the ceremony, and the transformation in my family's behavior was both swift and transparent. Extended relatives who had treated me with suspicious concern for months were suddenly approaching with warm smiles and congratulatory hugs. The speed of their reversal was almost comedic in its obviousness. Uncle Stephen was the first to reach me, his arms extended for an embrace that felt completely different from his cold behavior at Christmas. "Alva, I always knew you were special," he said loudly enough for other families to hear. "Your determination reminded me of myself at your age. Building a successful company while maintaining excellent grades takes extraordinary discipline." His words directly contradicted everything Richard had told the family about my supposed academic struggles and financial irresponsibility. Uncle Stephen was essentially rewriting history in real time, hoping that his sudden enthusiasm would make everyone forget months of treating me like a family burden who couldn't manage basic adult responsibilities. Aunt Margaret was equally transparent in her approach. She pulled me aside for what she probably intended as a private conversation, though her voice carried to nearby families. "I never believed your father's concerns about your spending habits," she whispered conspiratorially. "I told your Uncle Robert that something didn't add up about those stories." The blatant lie was almost insulting. Aunt Margaret had been one of the primary organizers of the Easter intervention, where family members confronted me about debt problems that existed only in Richard's imagination. Shed prepared a detailed budget worksheet and offered to help me track expenses to prevent future financial difficulties. Cousin Emma approached with genuine tears in her eyes, and her apology felt more sincere than the others. "I'm so sorry, Alva. I should have questioned the things Uncle Richard was saying about you. The stories never matched the person I knew you to be, but I was afraid to call him a liar directly." Emma's honesty was both refreshing and heartbreaking. She was acknowledging that family members had known something was wrong with Richard's narratives, but had chosen believing his lies over supporting me. Their silence had enabled his manipulation campaign to continue for months without challenge. Patricia, my mother, was struggling with divided loyalties that were written across her face. She wanted to celebrate my success and express pride in my achievements, but doing so meant acknowledging Richard's systematic deception about my character and capabilities. Her marriage depended on maintaining some version of family harmony, despite overwhelming evidence of her husband's manipulation. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," Mom whispered, squeezing my hand tightly. "You've accomplished something amazing, and you did it completely on your own." The emphasis on your own was her subtle acknowledgement that Richard's financial withholding had actually contributed to my independence and success. Tyler's reaction was the most complex to navigate. My younger brother was genuinely happy about my success, but he was also processing the uncomfortable reality that his privileged position in the family was suddenly irrelevant. Richard's favoritism toward Tyler had seemed significant when college funding was the primary concern, but trust fund money paled compared to self-made billions. "I had no idea you were building something so impressive," Tyler said quietly. "Dad always made it sound like you were struggling with basic adulting. I feel like I don't even know my own sister." His comment revealed how thoroughly Richard's lies had penetrated family relationships, poisoning connections between siblings who should have been supporting each other. The most dramatic reversal came from Grandmother Dorothy. She approached me slowly, using her walking cane for support. Her eyes filled with regret and confusion. Dorothy had been my strongest advocate during childhood, but Richard's manipulation had convinced her that I'd become selfish and financially irresponsible during college. "Can you forgive an old woman for believing lies?" she asked softly, her voice breaking slightly. "Your grandfather would be ashamed of how I treated you these past months. He always said you had more determination than anyone in the family." Her apology carried extra weight because Dorothy's approval had always meant more to me than any other relative's opinion. The immediate aftermath of the revelation also brought uncomfortable financial conversations that revealed family members' true motivations. Several relatives started mentioning investment opportunities, business ideas that needed funding, or personal projects that could benefit from financial backing. The speed with which celebration turned to solicitation was both predictable and disappointing. Uncle Robert, Aunt Margaret's husband, cornered me near the refreshment table with an elaborate pitch for his construction company expansion. Had apparently been planning this conversation for months, waiting for any sign that I had access to significant money. The timing of his approach made his intentions embarrassingly obvious. Richard himself was the most interesting case study in rapid behavior modification. The man who had sent a cruel text message about expecting no help was now trying to approach me with what looked like prepared remarks about family pride and shared success. His attempts at conversation were awkward and transparent, clearly motivated by self-interest rather than genuine emotion. "Alva, I think there might have been a misunderstanding about that text message," Richard started, his voice carrying false warmth that fooled no one within hearing distance. "I was trying to encourage your independence, not withdraw support. Sometimes tough love helps children develop resilience and business instincts." His attempted reframe was so obviously false that several people nearby exchanged glances. Richard was trying to claim credit for my success by suggesting that his financial manipulation had been intentional motivation rather than selfish betrayal. The explanation insulted everyone's intelligence, while revealing his desperate need to maintain some version of paternal authority. Social media was already reflecting the family's rapid opinion changes. Relatives who hadn't posted anything about my graduation were suddenly sharing old photos with me, adding captions about always believing in my potential and feeling proud to be related to such an accomplished young woman. The revisionist history was happening in real time, across multiple platforms. The most painful aspect of these reversals was recognizing how quickly family members abandoned principles when money became involved. People who had treated me with suspicion and concern based on Richard's lies were now eager to associate themselves with my success. Their love felt conditional and transactional rather than genuine and supportive. Business colleagues who were attending graduation started introducing themselves to my family members, creating opportunities for relatives to position themselves as important influences in my success. Uncle Stephen was telling Marcus about always encouraging Alva's entrepreneurial spirit, a statement that would have been news to me given his months of cold behavior. The reception was becoming a master class in human psychology and family dynamics under extreme circumstances. Financial success had instantly transformed me from family liability to family asset, and relatives were adjusting their behavior accordingly. The speed and transparency of their changes revealed uncomfortable truths about conditional love and self-interested relationships. Most importantly, Richard's manipulation campaign had backfired completely. Instead of isolating me and maintaining control, his lies had created a situation where my success appeared even more impressive because I'd achieved it despite family obstacles, rather than with family support. The narrative made me look stronger and more admirable, while making him appear petty and destructive. The family drama at graduation was only the beginning. Within 24 hours of Marcus' call, financial journalists had uncovered the full scope of my business empire, and the revelations kept getting bigger. Cloud Fortress wasn't my only company. It was one of 3 interconnected businesses I'd built during college, and their combined value was approaching $3 billion. Sarah Chen from Tech Daily was the first reporter to piece together the complete picture. Her article, published online that evening, detailed how I'd quietly revolutionized cybersecurity for American small businesses while maintaining a perfect grade point average at Stanford. The headline read, "26-year-old Stanford graduate built secret business empire worth $3 billion. The second company, DataStream Analytics, had grown out of Cloud Fortress' early success with medical practices. Healthcare clients needed more sophisticated data analysis tools to comply with new federal regulations, so ID developed software that simplified complex reporting requirements while maintaining patient privacy standards. DataStream now served over 400 healthcare organizations across 38 states. Secure Flow Consulting, the third business, provided cybersecurity auditing services for companies transitioning to cloud-based systems. My team of certified security experts helped traditional businesses modernize their data storage while maintaining protection against increasingly sophisticated cyber threats. SecureFlow had contracts with Fortune 500 companies and several state government agencies. The combined workforce across all three companies totaled 137 full-time employees, most of them recent college graduates who specialized in cybersecurity, data analysis, or business consulting. It created more jobs than some small towns could offer, and every employee received competitive salaries plus profit-sharing bonuses that made many of them financially comfortable before age 30. Richard had organized a family dinner for that Friday evening, ostensibly to properly celebrate my graduation and business success. The real motivation was obviously his need to understand and potentially benefit from this new family dynamic where his formerly helpless daughter controlled enormous wealth and business influence. The dinner was held at Patricia's favorite restaurant, an expensive steakhouse that Richard usually avoided due to cost concerns. The location choice revealed his new willingness to spend money when trying to impress me. A transparent attempt at demonstrating generosity had never shown during college when I actually needed financial support. Extended family members were invited, creating an audience for whatever reconciliation theater Richard had planned. Uncle Stephen, Aunt Margaret, Cousin Emma, and Grandmother Dorothy all attended, along with Tyler and his girlfriend Jessica. The gathering felt like a carefully staged production designed to establish new family relationships based on my financial success. During appetizers, Richard's wealth manager friend David Hamilton happened to stop by our table. The encounter was obviously planned, providing Richard with an opportunity to discuss my financial portfolio in front of family members who were still processing the magnitude of my business achievements. Alva's diversified investment strategy is impressive for someone her age, David said, speaking directly to Richard rather than to me. The real estate portfolio alone is worth substantial money. Properties in San Francisco, Austin, and Manhattan don't come cheap, especially for a recent graduate. The real estate revelation was news to my family, who hadn't known about property investments I'd made using business profits. The San Francisco condo provided housing during college, while appreciating significantly in value. The Austin property was near the University of Texas, where DataStream Analytics maintained a satellite office. The Manhattan apartment was purely investment, located in a neighborhood experiencing rapid gentrification. Richard's face showed a mixture of pride and calculation as David continued describing my financial achievements to the gathered family members. He was clearly enjoying the reflected glory of having a billionaire daughter while simultaneously trying to position himself as somehow responsible for my success. The charitable foundation is particularly noteworthy, David added. Alva established a scholarship fund for first-generation college students that's already helping dozens of young people attend universities they couldn't otherwise afford. The initial funding was $2 million, with automatic increases based on business profits. The scholarship fund was something I'd set up quietly during senior year, inspired by my own struggles with college financing. Recipients received full tuition support plus living expense stipends, ensuring that financial stress wouldn't interfere with their academic focus. The fund was named after Sarah's family, whose kindness during my pneumonia crisis had taught me the importance of supporting people in need. Grandmother Dorothy was crying openly by the time David finished describing my philanthropic activities. She'd spent months believing Richard's lies about my character, only to discover that I'd been secretly helping other students avoid the financial manipulation I'd experienced. The contrast between Richard's narrative and reality was emotionally overwhelming for her. The most significant revelation came when David mentioned board positions I'd been offered by major corporations and nonprofit organizations. Harvard Business School wanted me to serve on their Entrepreneurship Advisory Committee. The Federal Trade Commission had invited me to consult on cybersecurity regulations affecting small businesses. Forbes was considering me for their 30 under 30 list of influential young Americans. Speaking opportunities were flooding in from universities, business conferences, and professional organizations. The University of California system wanted me as their commencement speaker for next year's graduation ceremonies. The Small Business Administration was requesting testimony about cybersecurity challenges facing American entrepreneurs. Tyler was processing the reality that his sister had become a public figure whose opinions were sought by major institutions and government agencies. The brother who'd received preferential treatment throughout childhood was now sitting across from someone whose influence extended far beyond family dynamics. The most impressive aspect is how she balanced business development with academic excellence, David continued, clearly enjoying Richard's discomfort. Building 3 successful companies while graduating summa cum laude requires exceptional time management and strategic thinking. Most students struggle to handle coursework alone. Richard's attempts to claim credit for my success were becoming more desperate as David revealed the true scope of my achievements. He kept trying to interject comments about teaching independence and encouraging entrepreneurship, but his words sounded hollow against evidence of systematic financial manipulation and emotional abuse. The dinner conversation revealed how little my family actually knew about my life during college. They'd accepted Richard's stories about academic struggles and financial irresponsibility instead of asking direct questions about my experiences or offering genuine support during challenging times. Patricia was the most honest about family failures. I should have questioned why Alva never asked for help, she admitted quietly. It didn't make sense that such a smart, capable young woman would be struggling the way Richard described. I was afraid to challenge his version of events. The evening ended with family members expressing regret about believing Richard's lies and admiration for achievements they were only beginning to understand. But their apologies felt incomplete because they addressed symptoms rather than the underlying willingness to accept negative information about me without verification. More importantly, the dinner revealed Richard's complete inability to acknowledge his manipulation or accept responsibility for years of financial and emotional abuse. He continued trying to reframe his behavior as tough love or strategic parenting, refusing to admit that his actions had been motivated by selfishness rather than my best interests. The business empire revelations were changing more than just family dynamics. They were positioning me as a voice for young entrepreneurs and women in technology, creating platform opportunities I'd never anticipated but felt obligated to use responsibly. 1 month later, our family gathered for what Richard called a clearing the air conversation, though his real motivation was becoming increasingly obvious. His vintage car collection had landed him in financial trouble that my success made impossible to ignore. The man who'd told me not to expect help was now desperately hoping his billionaire daughter might save him from bankruptcy. The meeting took place at Mom's insistence, in our childhood home where so many financial manipulation scenes had played out over the years. Patricia had spent weeks preparing for this conversation, finally ready to choose between her marriage and her daughter's well-being. Her decision became clear the moment I walked through the front door. Before anyone says anything else, Mom announced, I need to apologize to Alva for years of enabling your father's lies. I knew he was taking your college money for those cars. I knew he was spreading false stories about you to the family. I was afraid of confronting him, but that fear hurt you more than it protected our marriage. Richard looked stunned. Had clearly expected Patricia's continued loyalty despite overwhelming evidence of his manipulation. Her public acknowledgement of his deception undermined whatever reconciliation strategy Head prepared for this family meeting. Tyler spoke next, his voice carrying genuine remorse that contrasted sharply with our parents' complex emotions. I should have questioned why Dad treated us so differently. The art school funding and trust fund were obvious compared to how he handled your college expenses. I was grateful for the preferential treatment instead of wondering why my sister was struggling. The accountability was meaningful, but I'd spent 4 years processing these family dynamics while building businesses that protected me from their choices. Forgiveness was possible, but trust would require consistent behavior changes over time rather than single conversations about past mistakes. I appreciate everyone's apologies, I said calmly. But I need you to understand how your choices affected my life. Dad's financial manipulation taught me that I couldn't depend on family support, which motivated me to build something he couldn't take away. The isolation from extended family forced me to develop business relationships based on mutual respect instead of blood obligations. Richard finally attempted his own apology, though it revealed more about his current financial desperation than genuine remorse. "I may have been too tough on you, Alva, but look how well you turned out. Maybe my approach helped you develop the independence that made Cloud Fortress possible." The attempted reframe was insulting and transparent. Richard was trying to claim credit for my success, while simultaneously positioning himself for financial assistance. His tough love explanation ignored years of systematic emotional abuse and calculated betrayal designed to maintain control rather than encourage growth. "Your behavior wasn't tough love," I replied firmly. "It was financial abuse designed to keep me dependent on your approval. Taking my college fund for vintage cars wasn't strategic parenting. Spreading lies to extended family wasn't encouraging independence. You tried to control me through money, and when that failed, you tried isolation." The conversation continued for 2 hours, with family members finally acknowledging uncomfortable truths about enabling Richard's manipulation. Extended relatives admitted they'd known something was wrong with his stories but had chosen avoiding conflict over supporting me. The collective failure was more systematic than any individual mistake. Grandmother Dorothy's presence provided moral weight that made deflection impossible. At 86 years old, Shed lived through enough family dysfunction to recognize manipulation when it was finally exposed clearly. Her disappointment in Richard carried special significance because Shed always been his strongest defender. "I raised you to be better than this," Dorothy told Richard bluntly. "Your father worked 2 jobs to pay for your education, and you repaid that sacrifice by stealing your daughter's college money for toy cars. This family didn't survive the Depression and 2 wars, so you could indulge midlife vanity at your child's expense." The financial reality became clear as Richard finally admitted the extent of his current problems. The vintage car collection, financed through multiple high-interest loans, had cost nearly $150,000 over 3 years. Monthly payments consumed most of his disposable income, and creditors were threatening repossession and legal action. Richard's expectation of financial rescue from his newly wealthy daughter was obvious but unspoken. Head spent the evening detailing his problems while avoiding direct requests for help. The strategy was clear: generate sympathy that would motivate me to offer assistance without him having to admit he needed money from the daughter Head systematically betrayed. My response was carefully considered and non-negotiable. "I won't be providing financial help to clean up problems caused by your irresponsible decisions. The money you spent on vintage cars was supposed to support my education. Asking me to solve your financial crisis would be continuing the pattern of making your choices my responsibility." The boundary was necessary for both practical and emotional reasons. Rescuing Richard from consequences of his poor decisions would enable future manipulation while teaching him that financial abuse could be profitable if his victim eventually became wealthy. Breaking the cycle required refusing to reward his behavior with assistance. However, I was willing to support family members who'd shown genuine accountability and respect. Tyler received help establishing his own graphic design business, funded through a formal loan with reasonable interest rates and clear repayment terms. Patricia got assistance with educational expenses for a nursing degree program Shed postponed during her marriage. Extended family members who'd participated in Richard's isolation campaign faced different consequences based on their individual actions. Uncle Stephen, who'd been particularly cruel during the Easter intervention, received no assistance with his construction company expansion. Aunt Margaret, who'd shown some skepticism about Richard's stories, got help with her daughter's college tuition. The most meaningful support went to establish programs that would help other first-generation college students avoid the financial manipulation ID experienced. The scholarship fund expanded to provide emergency assistance for students facing family financial sabotage. Counseling services offered support for young people dealing with parental financial abuse. Cloud Fortress announced plans for a nationwide internship program specifically designed for students from families that couldn't provide financial support. Program participants received full-time summer employment with competitive salaries, mentorship from experienced professionals, and guaranteed job offers upon graduation for students who met performance standards. The business expansion created hundreds of new jobs across multiple states, with hiring priority given to recent graduates who demonstrated resilience despite family or financial obstacles. Company culture emphasized supporting employees' professional development while respecting their personal autonomy and financial independence. 6 months after graduation, Richard filed for bankruptcy and lost his vintage car collection to creditors. The consequences were entirely self-inflicted and provided natural justice for years of prioritizing material possessions over family relationships. His financial crisis taught him lessons about responsibility that my success alone couldn't have provided. Patricia completed her nursing degree with honors and found fulfilling work at a hospital that specialized in trauma recovery. Her career provided both personal satisfaction and financial independence that allowed her to leave her marriage if Richard's behavior didn't improve permanently. The education investment gave her options she'd never had before. Tyler's graphic design business flourished with proper financial management and family support that encouraged rather than controlled his creative development. He repaid his business loan early and established his own scholarship fund for art students facing family disapproval of their career choices. The relationship with extended family required longer to repair, but several relatives demonstrated genuine change in how they approached family dynamics. Grandmother Dorothy became my closest family confidant, and we spent weekly phone calls discussing business challenges and life decisions. Her wisdom helped me navigate success with humility and purpose. My personal life also found balance, as business demands stabilized and family relationships healed. I met Daniel Martinez at a technology conference where he was presenting research on cybersecurity applications for nonprofit organizations. Had heard about Cloud Fortress but knew me as a conference speaker rather than a billionaire, which created space for genuine romantic connection. The experience taught me that true family relationships must be based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency or blood obligations. Building wealth provided freedom from manipulation, but using that wealth wisely required understanding the difference between helping people grow and enabling destructive behavior. Richard's betrayal had been painful, but it forced me to develop independence that served me better than privileged protection would have. The isolation from extended family taught me to build genuine support networks based on shared values rather than inherited obligations. Every challenge had ultimately contributed to strength and wisdom that benefited both my business and personal life. The most important lesson was recognizing that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting or trusting people who haven't earned trust through changed behavior. Setting boundaries with family members who demonstrated poor judgment protected my well-being while creating space for relationships with people who respected my autonomy and celebrated my success. Cloud Fortress and its sister companies continued growing, now serving over 2,000 businesses across 49 states. The employee profit-sharing program had created dozens of millionaires among staff members who'd joined the company during its early growth phases. Success was shared with people who'd contributed to building something meaningful rather than just claiming blood relationship. Speaking opportunities at universities allowed me to share lessons about resilience, financial independence, and building businesses that solve real problems for working Americans. Students facing family financial manipulation found hope in stories that proved success was possible despite obstacles created by people who should have been supportive. The scholarship fund had grown to support 300 students annually, with recipients chosen based on academic merit, demonstrated resilience, and commitment to using their education for community benefit. Many scholarship recipients later joined Cloud Fortress or started their own businesses, creating a positive cycle of supported success. Most satisfying was knowing that my experience with financial manipulation had led to systemic changes that would help other young people avoid similar abuse. Financial literacy programs, counseling services, and legal resources were now available to college students whose families used money as an emotional weapon. The story that began with a cruel text message at graduation had become a testament to the power of choosing independence over approval, accountability over excuses, and genuine support over conditional love. Family relationships were possible, but only when built on foundations of mutual respect rather than financial control or blood obligations. What started as a moment of public humiliation had transformed into a platform for positive change that reached far beyond my own family dynamics. The lesson was clear. Sometimes the people who claim to love us most are the ones who need the firmest boundaries, and true success comes from building lives that can't be destroyed by other people's poor choices. To everyone listening to this story, I want to ask, have you ever experienced financial manipulation from family members who claimed to have your best interests at heart? How did you find the strength to build independence despite people who should have supported your dreams? Share your experiences in the comments below. Please like this video if the story resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family dysfunction, and share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding that success is possible despite family obstacles. Thank you for listening, and remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's treatment of you.